Oklahoma hosting their first ever SEC versus SEC game, but will the Vols be kind to them? Locked on SEC, Locked on Vols crossover starts now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into a crossover edition, Locked On SEC, Locked On Vols. Great to have you guys along. On today's show, we're going to get into the big matchup everybody's talking about this weekend as College Game Day heads to Norman, Oklahoma for the Vols and the Sooners. I'm Chris Scordy. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to Everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Like I said, I'm Chris Scordy. Eric Cain from Locked On Vols joining us as we do a crossover edition here. As Eric, it is a massive, massive game for the Vols. Playtime is over. Whether it was a hard enough test with NC State or not, this is a big-time opponent. You start SEC play, and you start it on the road. Tough game, tough opponent, but excited it's finally here because it feels like we spent all offseason talking about this matchup.
Yeah, it's thrilled that it's here. It feels like this game week is kind of just, man, it's been a snail's pace, right? I mean, it's just Thursday morning, and you still got a couple more sleeps until they play this game. But this game has been highly anticipated. The SEC knew exactly what it was doing when it was picking these games in the new format, 16-team league, welcoming in Texas and Oklahoma. Knew that Tennessee needed to go to Oklahoma with the storylines of Josh Heupel and, of course, the 2 5-star quarterbacks and first SEC game and all that for Oklahoma. So, and two teams that entering the season have college football playoff aspirations still do. One team looks like it so far, one team doesn't, but still everything in front of both teams. So, big time matchup, big road matchup for Tennessee. You're right. Playtime is over for the Vols. Thought they would get more of a challenge against NC State. A lot of people were high on the Wolfpack entering the year. So far, that is not a good football team, but Oklahoma will certainly be the best football team Tennessee has seen.
Well, let's start there because I thought it would be a good kind of idea to take a little snapshot of both teams and where they are so far this year, 3 weeks in. Let's start with the Vols. I mean, they have exceeded, I think, everybody's expectations so far. Even people who thought Tennessee was going to be good, I think, have been taking a step back and been like, all right, the Vols are legit. And, of course, the question is, are they elite? And we're going to find that out over the next couple of weeks as these games play out. But, man, I mean, beating the snot out. I mean, you expect them to beat the snot out of Chattanooga, but 69-3 was pretty damn impressive. You expected them to probably beat NC State, but to win 51-10, super impressive. And then to stomp all over Kent State the way they did, 71-0. I mean, just doesn't get any better. Give me if we're giving a report card grade, giving them an A, probably, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have to, right? I mean, there's one thing to say, okay, well, the level of competition's not been what you're going to see, into September on into your SEC schedule. I recognize that. But what do you do in those games? These players and these coaches didn't make these games, right? I mean, that was the administration from years and years ago. You can only do what's in front of you. You can only play the teams in front of you. I know that's coach speak, but Tennessee's gone out there and absolutely dominated every phase of the game. UTC was a second-round playoff team in FCS a season ago, top 10 team in FCS. I'm just trying to say that's a pretty good team for its level, and you go out there and dominate it the way they did. And look what they did against Georgia State, I guess the week after they left Knoxville. NC State, as I mentioned, everybody thought NC State's going to be a really good team to kind of challenge for a spot in the playoffs. So far, that's not been the case. Tennessee absolutely shut down KC Concepcion, made Grayson McCall look so pedestrian. There was no run game in that contest for the Wolfpack. Tennessee rolled in that one. Then, of course, Kent State, I mean, that's the worst football team I've ever seen in my life. I hope they go and win every single game. I mean, Tennessee had no business playing them. So Tennessee has dominated, not just one convincingly. Tennessee's dominated every single game it's had so far. So I think that's certainly worth noting. A+ A on the report card right now. And, it's faced a little bit of adversity, not a whole lot, but it's going to face adversity on Saturday on the road and in this environment against the Sooners.
Yeah, I thought that NC State game was good for Nico to have the two blunders that he did, right? I mean, to throw the interceptions. You kind of have to – you knew they were going to come for any new young quarterback. They're going to turn the ball over. The hope is that they do it in a spot that it doesn't cost you a game, and it's a huge costly penalty, and it wasn't. So That's the kind of the growing pains that Nico will go through. Now, I've had some people say maybe this is the week that he goes through real growing pains, a road hostile environment. The one in Charlotte, there were more Vol fans there than NC State fans, it felt like. So this one might be the one. How does he respond? If he throws that pick six in Norman, can he bounce back? Does he respond? So, but again, good he got at least, it's not good to throw interceptions, but I'm saying like at least he got it out of his system. But yeah, I think overall his play has been very good. But I was hyping up Dylan Sampson in the offseason, and I had some people saying, well, it might be a little bit more running back by committee, but Sampson has been, it's been lights out. He's been awesome, and it's crazy to think him and Jaquindon Jackson right there as two of the best running backs in the SEC so far.
Yeah, I haven't watched every single Arkansas game. I've watched one Arkansas game, and I know they played not just 4 quarters, went into overtime. Dylan Sampson's played 7 quarters this year. It's like 7 quarters this year, second in rushing in the SEC, second in all-purpose yards, but like a close second, right behind, right behind him. But Dylan Sampson's, blowing out everybody in terms of touchdowns in the SEC with 9 so far. He's a really good player, man. I think that, right now he's Tennessee's best player, and if he goes on the road, take this week for example, and has one of those games where he just takes things over. Everybody in Tennessee knows who Dylan Sampson is. A lot of people around the SEC know who he is. People around college football are going to start learning, okay, this running back at Tennessee, could he be considered the best running back in the country? I don't like Heisman talking week 3 or 4, and I'm not trying to put him there, but I'm saying he's going to start getting in those conversations if he keeps this pace up, especially, in games like this on the road. So he's been phenomenal, and for Tennessee to control this game and win this game, Tennessee's definitely got to run the football efficiently, which it normally has under Josh Heupel, and Dylan Sampson obviously going to be a big part of that.
On the flip side, and kind of, again, giving a report card kind of grade through the first 3 weeks, Oklahoma, they're 3-0, but it hadn't been a pretty 3-0. That Friday night game to start off college football weekend, they crushed Temple 51-3, and they didn't do much on offense, but they didn't have to do much. The defense kind of dominated the day, and it was like, okay. Now, week 2, they get Houston, and I watched most of that game. Willie Fritz coming over from Tulane, they got their brains beat in week 1 by, I think it was UNLV, and then they go up to Norman, played a pretty competitive game with Oklahoma, and Oklahoma gets out with a 16-12 victory, but even Venable said after the game, we didn't deserve to win that game. We probably shouldn't have. And then this past week, kind of messed around with Tulane, who nearly beat Kansas State a week prior. They were able to pull away late, but that thing was close into the 4th quarter. So, some people say, like, play with your food. Maybe that's what Oklahoma's been doing. They kind of knew they were going to be favored in all 3 of these games. But the scary part for Oklahoma is defense very good, but offense has not lived up to the hype yet, particularly Jackson Arnold, big 5-star quarterback that they had high hopes for.
Well, I'll say this. I think he's got a lot of potential. And you saw last week where he kind of started feeling himself a little bit, and he had some runs, got his confidence up. As you very well know, covering this league, Nick Anderson, who I believe they're going to get back this week, 10 touchdowns a season ago, hadn't played a snap this year. Another starting receiver, Jalil Farouk, out for the year. They on the offensive line, brand new offensive line. They went and got 4 transfers. Okay, starting center's been out since week 1, high ankle sprain. Left guard's out for the year. Right tackle has been in and out of the lineup. They've had so many different combinations up front. It feels like, at least from the outside looking in, I don't pretend to know, I'm not on that beat, but it feels like they haven't even really kind of got started offensively because of all this stuff. But you got to go out and play the games, and Oklahoma has had no run game. There's no identity there in the backfield, and I think that's hurt Jackson Arnold. Defensively, I think they've looked pretty sharp, and they're going to get tested, obviously, their biggest test this week with Tennessee, so they haven't seen anything remotely close to what Tennessee's going to show them, and so we'll see how good that defense is, but pretty good against the run. Aggressive back end like last year when they had 20 interceptions already, 10 takeaways for that defense. So, I would say defense is typical for Brent Venables so far in the early season. I'd say offense, very much a letdown. But I do think that there's some contributors in there where it feels like they just keep, sinking in quicksand because of all these injuries.
Yeah, and they haven't been, like, to your point, haven't been able to get the run game going. Gavin Sawchuk ran for 744 yards and 9 touchdowns for them last year. He has been hadn't been done much for them. Javante Barnes has done a little bit, but Jackson Arnold's been their run game through the first couple weeks. So both 3-0, but again, if we're giving out grades, Tennessee gets an A so far. Oklahoma probably gets a C maybe a C plus because the defense has been so good, but certainly we're going to find out a lot about what this team is made up of. And that's coming up next right here on Locked On SEC and Locked On Vols, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day.
You've heard us talk about FanDuel. It is America's #1 sports book. Got something a little bit different for you guys. I've been telling you about it the last week or so, but time's running out. September 22nd, now through September 22nd. All FanDuel.com customers can go and bet $5, get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with YouTube TV's base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need to do is have a Google account, a current form of payments, and you can cancel anytime. So take advantage of this deal. Again, $5 bet, 3-week free trial, NFL Sunday Ticket. That's your Sunday afternoon. Saturday afternoon, let's take this game, for example, Tennessee, Oklahoma. You've got Tennessee back in May. Tennessee was a 5-point dog. 2 weeks ago, Tennessee was a 2.5-point dog. Before last week's game, Tennessee was a 2.5-point favorite. Tennessee jumped up to a 7.5-point favorite as early as Monday. Now, at the time of this recording, Tennessee is a 6.5-point favorite. That total's dropped down from 59.5 to 57.5. Call me crazy, and this isn't fun, but I like the under this week in the total category. But I like Tennessee to cover this football game. So get your Saturday, put some coin in your pocket over at FanDuel Sportsbook, take care of your Sundays with an NFL Sunday Ticket, all that and more. FanDuel, it is America's #1 sportsbook. And do want to tell you guys, Locked On SEC, Locked On Vol fans, have you heard about ROY? It stands for Return on You. It's a new platform that lets you, the fans, get involved in NIL like never before by making contributions directly to your favorite athletes. By supporting players directly, you can shape rosters, retain talent, keep your favorite athletes out of the transfer portal, because that's over half the battle every single year now, is retaining that roster. NIL has changed the game for athletes. ROY can change the NIL game for the fans. Outside of directly supporting players and the engage with athletes on the NIL journey with some stuff, you get exclusive content access. Fans can contribute directly to a campaign. They're going to receive access to content from the athletes, such as commitment announcements, behind-the-scene footage, personal reflections, all that and more that's notable to the athlete. Plus, the biggest thing, fans' contributions are securely held and only distributed if the athlete makes the decision that aligns with the fan support. If not, the money is returned right back to the fans. So that's the no-risk contribution. So go check it out today. You can download ROY on the iOS or Android by entering the referral code LOCKEDON. You're going to automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 cash. Visit joinroy.com for additional details. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Get off the sidelines and into the NIL game today with ROY.
Continue on here with our crossover, Locked On SEC, Locked On Vols, discussing the game of the week as the Tennessee Vols head up to Oklahoma to play the Sooners. And Eric, I want to get into a little bit of the matchups in this game. And both teams have their strengths and weaknesses. We kind of touched on a little bit, but let's get into the nitty-gritty. Let's start with what I think is the strength of Oklahoma. And look, they put their money where their mouth is. They spent money on the defensive line this offseason in the transfer portal. You know, I've seen, captain announcements for captain of the week, defensive tackles. I mean, Grayson Halton, Dejon Terry, Dominic Williams, they spent a ton of money on. To me, this seems like the strength of Oklahoma is that defensive line up front. And really, honestly, the strength for Tennessee has been the run game. So this is going to be good on good.
Yeah, real quick, kind of a sidebar here. You mentioned the name Dejon Terry. You know, he spent 2 years at Tennessee. He went from Kansas, spent 2 years at Tennessee, and then I guess he's been at Oklahoma for a year or two now. Something I didn't really consider, and I'm not saying that he's the key for Oklahoma in this game, but he went up against Tennessee's offense in practice every day for 2 years. Like, he knows the tempo, he knows the strat, he knows the run game, like, he knows all that type of stuff. I mean, if I'm DJ Terry, which I'm sure he is, I mean, he's communicating, he's, they're watching film. He had a front row seat to this offense for 2 years. So yeah, just something minor, another like little minor storyline in this game. But yeah, I think this is the strength for sure for Oklahoma is the rush defense, and Danny Stutzman, the linebacker, is a really good player. Averaging over 10 tackles so far to begin this season a game. Always seems to have good linebacker play at Oklahoma, right? But yeah, I think that's going to be a strength. They've got strength in numbers, not to the extent of Tennessee on that defensive line, but certainly that they're good up front. I think Ethan Downs is a good player. Mason Thomas, who In talking with some Oklahoma people, I just saw the box score last week. He had 3 sacks against Tulane. Really good pass rusher, not that great against the run. But, Tennessee is going to run the football. Tennessee's going to use the tight ends. They've gone 12 personnel with 2 tight ends pretty frequently the first 3 weeks of the season, something that Josh Heupel at Tennessee has never had the luxury of doing. He did that a lot at UCF in previous stops. But Tennessee's got a number of different ways to kind of run the football. They'll pull tackles, they'll pull guards, kick guys out, take that tight end, H-back, lead in with a little split zone. It's going to be a great challenge. I'm intrigued to see kind of how that matchup is. I think Tennessee will run the football efficiently, but I'm not expecting, again, not Kent State. They ran for 456 last week. That's not going to happen. But I could realistically see in Tennessee pushing for 200 yards. That would be a really, really good day against this defense. But I think if Tennessee's going to find success, control the game, they've got to be able to run the football, and that's what Oklahoma's good at, defending it.
Yeah, and you mentioned, a good group of linebackers. They're led by Stutzman, plays sideline to sideline, can close. Sure tackler and all that. And then when we get to the secondary, it's led by Billy Bowman, who, I remember being at SEC Media Days, and he was making the rounds, and Nick Saban was there, and he grabbed him by the arm and stopped him and complimented him on a great career so far. And, there's no doubt he can be a difference maker. He had a huge interception last week in that game against Tulane to really turn the tide. And when I look at this Oklahoma secondary, it's a secondary with 4 interceptions this season. It's 4 different guys, Spears, Jennings, Hardy, Walker, and Billy Bowman. It's just kind of interesting because on the flip side, Tennessee, Will Brooks had the big pick 6, but that's, really as far as, interceptions go for Tennessee. So I just wonder, what happens if Oklahoma, that defensive front, is slowing down the run. They're keeping Dylan Sampson in check, and then it becomes Tennessee's got to throw the football. If Nico's got to take care of the football this week. Now, he's got some great wide receivers to go out and stretch the field and go get it. But to me, that's kind of, if we're talking about mission objectives for this week, I got to have Nico protect that football and not turn it over.
Yeah, got to protect the football, no doubt. That's a key for him, being able to get the snap off, communicate with his line of scrimmage, with that tempo. If they have to go to the clap or they have to go to the silent count, I think that's going to affect the tempo. And so, I think that's another the storyline in this football game, because Tennessee's not, I hate to say, well, Tennessee didn't do it well last year, the year before that, so they won't do it well this year. I hate doing that, but trends are trends, right? Tennessee at Georgia 22, Tennessee, South Carolina game. I can't wait to see the ESPN 30 for 30 on that South Carolina game in 2022 one day and 20 years from now, because I still don't know what happened. Last year at Florida, the crowd noise was really, really big, so we'll see. Tennessee, Will Brooks had the pick 6. Nobody has challenged the secondary, and that's still, I have a huge question mark about Tennessee's secondary. It's brand new. The defense overall has looked great, and the secondary's biggest asset is this defensive line for Tennessee. But they still have not been, they've been challenged twice, and Tennessee's defended it well, and they have one, Casey Concepcion had 1 reception for 30 yards, and that's pretty much been it. And Kent State didn't try vertical passing game. UTC didn't try vertical passing game. Jackson Arnold will. So I'm intrigued to see kind of how Nico navigates that aspect of it, how Tennessee defends it. But kind of going back to strengths and some key matchups, the overwhelming, disadvantage of this football game is the Oklahoma offensive line. Tennessee goes 13, 14 guys deep across the front. James Pierce hadn't even got going yet in terms of the sacks. The Tennessee defensive tackles have been the best part of this team so far. I think that as the game goes along, if it doesn't, jump out that way in the first or second quarter, as the game goes along, that defense, because the numbers, the defensive line, just going to wear down Oklahoma, and Tennessee will truly benefit from that, in my opinion.
Yeah, to me, that's, if Oklahoma is going to win this game, it's not just the defense playing strong. It's not just slowing down the run and getting a takeaway or 2. It's got to be, they have to protect and run block those big hog mollies up front for Tennessee. And, that's been a weakness for Oklahoma so far. It's one of the biggest questions coming into this season is, all new offensive line, how are they going to do this? They did a good job bringing guys in through the portal, but injuries have reared its ugly head. And so that to me is what's interesting, because you brought up Tennessee's DBs. How good are they? We don't know yet. They have not been tested yet. If that Oklahoma offensive line can give Jackson Arnold time to throw it, he's got some good receivers. You mentioned Nick Anderson. We had him on Locked On SEC this offseason. The kid set the freshman school record for most touchdowns in a season with 10 last year. So he is a big-time weapon for them to get back. And, that if we're talking an Oklahoma recipe for a win, it has to be they give Arnold time to throw. And if they do that, I think he's going to connect with some of those receivers. And like we said, we'll see how good those Tennessee DBs can be.
I like Tennessee's corners. I really do. I think Tennessee's got 3 corners that can play. Ricky Gibson, who's a sophomore, Jamal McCoy, who came over from Oregon State. Jamal McCoy is a good football player. I really think he's going to be a good one, not just for Tennessee, but for the SEC. And then you have Jalen McMurray, who came over from Temple. I think those 3 are pretty solid. Not a lot of depth behind them, but I like Tennessee's corners. At the star or the nickelback spot, Tennessee's kind of splitting time with a veteran. It's actually Rodney Harrison's son, Christian Harrison, who's been a complete afterthought his entire career here until fall camp this year when Jordan Thomas, got out with an injury, and he was thrust into action. And then you got Boo Carter, who kind of splits time with him. He's a true freshman, a lot of ability, but makes true freshman mistakes even in these 3 games. Then the 3 safeties, Will Brooks and Andre Turrentine. Then you got Jacoby Thomas coming in. I think the corners are solid. I think there's playmaking ability at the nickelback spot. As long as the safeties just keep things in front of them and don't miss tackles in open space, I think Tennessee overall is going to be okay. But again, they'll get tested this week really for the first time.
Yeah, and you just wonder how much college game day being on campus. To me, I always say it always brings a little bit extra juice. And this is the first time in a long time Tennessee or Oklahoma is going to have college game day on campus. They had it in 2020 for Bedlam, but it was during the pandemic. There were no fans, so it doesn't really count. But this is the first time in a while, and we saw it last week with South Carolina and LSU. First time Columbia had it in a decade. Those fans brought it. It brought, the juice was there. So certainly it will create a very interesting atmosphere. Coming up next, Eric, we're going to get your prediction. I'll make my prediction, and we'll talk about what's ahead for both these teams here on a Locked Over Crossover Edition.
Want to tell you about our friends over at the Game Time app. What is the Game Time app? Well, it is a place where you can buy tickets to events in your area, not just sporting events, but you can buy events to concerts, to comedy shows. In Knoxville, you got the Tennessee Smokies. They're going to be moving downtown next season, but they've been playing out in Kodak, and you could buy tickets to the Tennessee Smokies games as well. And when you download that app, you put in the promo code LOCKEDONCollege, you're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. You create that account, download the app, create that account, or you can go to gametime.co, put in the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Lowest price guarantee, where Game Time is going to credit you 110% of the difference if you find a cheaper ticket somewhere else in the same section. The most flexible customer service in the ticketing industry, and they've got the Game Time picks where you can go and filter through all the fluff so you can find the tickets at the cheapest price for you. All this and more for Tennessee football, for Oklahoma football, for SEC football. Buy your tickets on the Game Time app by putting in that promo code LOCKEDONCollege.
Final segment of our crossover here, Locked On SEC, Locked On Vols, previewing the SEC game of the week. It is Tennessee at Oklahoma. And Eric, just for accuracy's sake, I had to go look. You've got the lineup here as Tennessee minus 6.5. I'm looking at FanDuel, and this line has moved even a little bit more. It is Tennessee minus 7.5 now. So there is money coming in on the Vols, expecting them to win and win convincingly. So as we get into it, time to make our predictions. Start with you, Eric. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I like Tennessee in this game. I think when you just look at the two teams right now, Tennessee's playing with confidence. I think Tennessee is built deeper. I think Tennessee's got more playmakers on the offensive end. I think Tennessee's relentless on the defensive front, even though I think that's a strength for Oklahoma. You look at these individual matchups, and there's not one that honestly right now I like Oklahoma more than Tennessee. So I don't think it'll be easy. It's usually not easy to win on the road in this league, right? And I know this is Oklahoma's first SEC game, but I think there'll be some adversity, but I do think Tennessee will bounce back from that. I think that as the game goes along, I continue to say this defensive front is going to absolutely bully Oklahoma's offensive line. It might not happen in the first quarter or second quarter, but in that second half, it's going to be all Tennessee, in my opinion, because of the strength in numbers and just the athleticism of that defensive line led by James Pierce. So I like Tennessee to maybe get a late touchdown and make it look a little bit more than what it is, but I like Tennessee convincingly. I think I'll go to somewhere around 35 to 17. Tennessee's going to win this one on the road.
I think I'm with you. I think, look, I think the hype and the excitement of being the first SEC game in Norman, game day being there, I think the fans are going to bring it. I think it's going to be a rocking, hostile environment. I wouldn't be shocked if Tennessee makes some early mistakes, some false starts, some, playing behind the downs, have to punt, I think things like that. I think a close game at half. Maybe it's like 14-10, 13-9, something like that. But I do think come late third quarter, early fourth quarter, they pull away. Maybe even something that looks like that Alabama USF game a few weeks ago, where the final score, you go, wow, that felt like it was a close game for a while.
I was scoreboard watching in the Tennessee game. It was 14-13 with 10 minutes left, and then I look back and it's like 45-30. I'm like, what happened?
I don't think it's that drastic, but I'm looking at some of like the official predictions out there. Justin Martinez said 34-20 Tennessee. Bill Bender is 34-24 Tennessee. So most people kind of saying 10 points, 14 points, somewhere in that range. And still, I think that's a great win for Tennessee to go on the road and win. You win by 2 scores. I don't care if it wasn't a blowout. I think that's a good win. So I'm thinking that's how this one plays out. Now, again, Nico, take care of the football. Cover those receivers. If Nick Anderson is back for Oklahoma. One interesting angle, though, I will throw out there, and I've seen some Oklahoma fans push for this. There's a lot of Oklahoma fans that love Michael Hawkins, the freshman quarterback. They have been pushing to see him. I wonder what happens in this game if Jackson Arnold comes out and he struggles, maybe throws an early interception, if they don't make a quarterback change and we see number 9 in there. So just something to consider. And then, how much has Tennessee, researched him and done scouting report on him. So just something to consider if they do. And look, it's been the theme of the SEC so far, Eric, through the first few weeks. Quarterback changes galore across the SEC, so wouldn't be shocking. But I'm going to go, I think I kind of agree with those guys. I'm going to go somewhere, let's say 30-20, Tennessee gets it done.
Yep, and I think moving forward, that's a huge win for Tennessee. It's a road win. And again, I can't stress this enough. You got to handle the environments well. I mean, you can have a penalty here and there, but you can't have those penalties on third down. You can't let them derail your drive. So, snap counts, Nico, Cooper Mays being at center. That's something I'm obviously going to be watching for in this football game, how Nico handles that. But if you win this game, I don't care what the score is. You win this game, you come back home, you got a bye week for Tennessee. You're sitting at 4-0, 2 wins over top 25 teams at the time. You're sitting pretty. And Chris, correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of people think, you got different publications putting out weekly college football playoff predictions. I don't know if there's going to be a publication in America that doesn't have Tennessee in the top 12. Okay. And they might have Tennessee as being the best team in the country in terms of the way they're playing if you come out there and you win that game on the road come Monday morning. So Georgia coming up, later in the season, Alabama at home, Florida, those are huge games. You win this game if you're Tennessee, you are sitting pretty. You obviously want to win those games, but you've kind of afforded yourself a little bit of a loss or maybe 2. You win this game, and I expect Tennessee to win this game.
Yeah, and their 2 toughest games, remaining at home against Alabama and on the road at Georgia. You lose those 2, but you win the rest, 10-2. You're probably not winning the SEC, but you're, getting into the playoff as a 10-2 team. So I do think it's worth pointing out, though, 3 of Tennessee's 4 losses last year all came on the road. Mm-hmm. How does this team perform as a road team this week? Certainly going to be a big one here.
And your 2 losses in 2022 on the road.
Yeah. So look, I don't think it means much about Josh Heupel can't win on the road. I just think it's tough to win on the road in the SEC. That's why
I agree.
But we will see. But to your point, this thing sets up very well. We'll see what Arkansas does against Auburn next week. But that road trip, could be maybe Arkansas's folded up shop at that point. They're done. It's an easy win. Maybe Florida's fired Billy Napier by the time you get to that one. So we'll see. But certainly a big game. We're both picking the Vols. Let us know in the comments who you're picking. And that's going to do it for this edition of this crossover edition of Locked On Vols, Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. For your second listen, you can check out our buddy Spencer McLaughlin doing Locked On College Football, covering the big picture of all the other big national games. Find Locked On College Football on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. That's going to do it for us. For Eric Cain, I'm Chris Gordy. We'll talk to you tomorrow.